Alrighty, what have we here? This one's interesting. For draw, we got Wharf, potentially Swamp Shacks, Landing Party, Gear, Enchantress, Figurine. Okay, so most of the kingdom is draw cards. Villages are Landing Party and Swamp Shacks. Swamp Shacks is the only sustainable village because Landing Party gets stuck in play. Plus buy Wharf, Merchant Guild Figurine, Chapel for Thinning, as well as Bat off of Vampire. Circle of Witches does not look important, not terribly strong, especially with good thinning around. Orchard does look important, a lot of extra victory points. Orchard usually just tells you to do what you're going to do anyway, which is build a big engine, but it gives you an extra incentive to do so. Always interesting when you can make figurine work. I don't think it's strong enough here, but like conceivably you could buy a chapel, thin down, use figurines for your draw, just discard that chapel for a little bit of buy, and then that deck would just be treasures and vampires. Actually would fit fine in that. Like figurines, vampires, and some treasures would be a nifty deck. Don't think it's good enough to beat the rest of this stuff though. So we got really good draw between Wharf and Swamp Shacks and stuff. Swamp Shacks I think has a lot of synergy with duration cards. You know, if you have a Wharf in play already, it's buffing your Swamp Shacks. Landing Party is actually not the strongest card in general, but if you take a few Landing Parties, they get stuck in play forever, and then all of a sudden your Swamp Shacks just naturally draw more cards. Yeah. You know what I've got to play all of a sudden? I wonder if you just don't bother with Chapel here. So obviously Chapel's a really strong card, best card in the base set, and usually the best strategy when it's on the board is you take Chapel, you thin down really aggressively, and then you build back up from there. In this case though, there's just like such an abundance of draw that I don't think you need to get thin, in part because a lot of that draw, I think, is coming from Swamp Shacks, which is your main village. So if you're buying Swamp Shacks anyway for the village, and you're just getting tons of draw off it as a byproduct, then you're going to end up in the situation where I think where draw is just not that much of a consideration, and it's a question of how you add payload efficiently. And so I think thinning is actually not that important here, just because of how easy I think it will be to draw the deck, I think. I'm going to try skipping Chapel and see if that works. Probably Gear Landing Party or Gear Silver, I think, for getting to 5 for Vampire. Gear Silver a little bit better at hitting 5. Landing Party, like I said, a card I'm going to want anyway. I think probably hitting 5 is important. Alas, the Gear has bottom decked, which is tragic. Getting to set aside 2 estates would have been lovely. I'm not happy at how often I'm hitting 3 here. None of the 3s, I think, have any long-term purpose in this deck. I want a bunch of Landing Parties and Swamp Shacks, and so hitting 4 consistently would be a lot happier than hitting 3 consistently. Wharf? Don't think I need a 3rd Vampire, do I? I mean, I could, they're decent gains. I feel like generally 2 is enough. Oh no, my Wharf, my poor Wharf, that was enchanted. I guess I'm not sitting aside here. Actually, you know what? I'm conflicted. No, this is fine. I was considering, I think ideally rather trash the copper, but I was thinking if having the Gear in play could help buff the Swamp Shacks next turn, maybe that's worth it, but I don't think it makes enough of a difference. Like 1 Gear on its own would not be causing swamp shacks to draw extra cards. I'll just trash the copper. Another landing party. And a merchant guild. This hand, I'm pretty sure this deck has villages. Okay, maybe I'll draw one here. Nope. There's a village. A little bit late. Okay, here we go. We're getting places. I think I'm just going to stop here and set those aside. That seems nice. Let's say swamp shacks, and merchant guild. Like, I think I'm at the point where we're gonna not need draw anymore, because you're just clicking merchant guilds and swamp shacks. I think the swamp shacks are naturally going to be that draw. Like, this first swamp shack is already going to draw 2 cards off of my durations. I can let the gear go. Swamp shacks. Merchant guild. And coppers. I actually could dud here if I don't find a swamp shacks off of the wharf. Maybe I took too many coppers. That might have been a little bit greedy. Yeah, yep. Flew just a bit too close to the sun. Maybe the net could have used just like one more wharf or something at some point. Probably the answer is just buy slightly fewer coppers there, because that was a little bit unnecessarily risky. But you know, wharf provides the start of turn draw that guarantees you find the swamp shacks in your starting hand to kick off. But like this is the point. I'm like overdrawing by like 14 cards or something here. So certainly, even at the point where I bought those coppers, had I found the swamp shacks, my deck definitely could have drawn it all. It's a little bit risky because, as it turned out, I didn't find the swamp shacks, but it wasn't like I was over searching how much my deck could theoretically do there. We're just drawing so much that all about the payload here. Just more merchant guilds. I'll take a third wharf. I mean, just because it's points, I suppose. And a bunch of coppers. And a landing party, maybe? I don't really know what I'm doing here, if I'm being honest. Probably in hindsight, I forgot about the vampires. If I wanted the Merchant Guild and the Wharf, I probably should have gained them off of the Vampire. I'm not sure I wanted this many more fives. I'm not going to take duchies. Counterfactually, probably I could have gained the Wharf and the Merchant Guild off of the Vampire and then bought some other stuff. Saved myself a few coffers. All of these seem fine. I'm pretty sure I'm going to draw anyway. I'll let the swamp shacks go. Okay, for a second there I didn't see the swamp shacks. And I thought I was going to potentially regret that. Alright. Bum, 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 bum. I don't know if that was the optimal set of buys or anything. It just doesn't feel like the you know what? I probably had a pilot, didn't I? I should have just bought the, the landing parties and the merchant guilds. Obviously, this game is already long over. Yeah, sure. I had like 10 buys and plenty of money. I obviously missed an obvious pilot there. Probably also could have done merchant guilds and duchies, or landing parties and duchies would have also been a satisfactory pile out. How does the bot have 0 points? You should just accidentally have points from Orchard. Bot's thinking hard here about how many coppers to buy. This is one of those situations where like bot has identified that it has no way to win, and so its decisions just start to make very little sense because it's trying to find the best path to victory where there is none, and so everything looks equally bad, and all of a sudden it's seriously contemplating stuff like buying coppers. And 1, 2, take a gear for points, a duchy, and a duchy. There we go. So, obviously, pretty sure I missed a very trivial pile out here. What this ought to have looked like was like merchant guilds, duchy, and I guess gear for points, and an estate. Yeah. Interesting kingdom. I don't know that I played that optimally. It's a tricky one because at some point I think you get to the stage where you're playing swamp shacks to play your merchant guilds. Your merchant guild is your payload, and then you're just getting enough draw for the swamp shacks. And oh goodness. Yes, Bijou? No. I'm sure she was informing me of a UPS driver or something. Totally lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so I think that the draw is just coming incidentally off of the swamp checks at some point, and then you start adding a bunch of payload. As it turns out, apparently there's such a thing as too much payload. Those 3 coppers caused an unnecessary dud there. But I think something along these lines looks right. And then you're just clicking a few early durations to set up the swamp checks to be draw. I think I like the chapel skip. Obviously, it's hard to say that's clearly correct because chapel's a strong card, but just the straight into vampire made a lot of sense to me. What does the bot do? The bot seems to have consciously avoided Orchard. It's like it's playing around Warlord here or something. It's collect only 2 of every single action card. I don't believe in figurine here. I certainly do not believe in gold here. Yeah, I don't know about this deck. For a brief moment, I think it looked like it was doing real stuff. Like it had Swamp Shacks, Merchant Guild, Landing Party. But I don't know about the rest. This is the one time I've seen the bot actually thin its cards. And it was the one kingdom where I looked at it and was just like, yeah, thinning is not worth it here. Hard AI, you are an enigma.